Hey, all you beautiful Ethic cuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Tuesday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our healthcare workplaces can fix our world, I got a real treat for you today. We're going to be talking about how do you navigate compliance across multiple facility situation. Let's get a massive emoji explosion to get going here. This is like the inner circle, these Tuesday sessions. So we got Dawn here today. We have Michelle here today. So we're up to 600 emojis. I love it. As we run through these announcements here, drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat because your network is your net worth. And guess what? Neither are big enough. So you got to take advantage of this resource we have, this community that we're all a part of. Look at all those hearts. I love it. You got to take advantage of this thing and connect with at least one person today. Whatever you're struggling with, whether it's something with your career, whether it's something with your program, I guarantee you that there's somebody on this call today, on this episode, who has dealt with this exact thing. So you got to grab the steering wheel of your life, grab the steering wheel of your career, and push that forward. If you are looking for designations, or if you have one of these designations with HRCI, the CCB, or SHRM, this is the place to be. You can even double dip. So we give out hundreds of thousands of CEUs each year, and multiple ones each week. So those will be coming for all Ethicsverse members. And I'm gonna run through a couple of quick announcements here. So put in where you're coming from, put in your LinkedIn URL, and I wanna share our UX UI upgrade. So in our job, we have to make bets with the resources we have. And it's hard to make those bets when you're flying blind. So when you can get better information right at your fingertips, you can direct your team's resources or direct your own day's work towards the things that matter most. People are absolutely loving this new UI UX. So thank you, all of you who've contributed ideas. We want to keep investing in our tool. We want to keep investing in this industry because we're really standing at this inflection point where the next 10 years can look way different than the last 10 years, but it's going to take us doing things a little bit different. It's going to take us showing up as business people and really connecting the things that we're doing to the objectives of the organization. And so when we have better information at our fingertips, we can do that. Also wanted to I'm still pushing this thing, okay? Ethicsverse 2.0 was a little bit less than a month ago. This was the widest attended ethics event in history, okay? Over 4,500 people signed up for it. 50,000 emojis, that's how I keep score, you know. But we had 4 phenomenal sessions, so if you missed those sessions, you can check them out on the console. You also can check those out on YouTube. The YouTube link should be in the channel. Hit a like and subscribe and hit that little bell. But if you don't have time for all that, download this white paper. It's all the best takeaways from Ethicsverse Day 2.0. You know, I'm always pushing this thought leadership. There's so much great, there's so many great podcasts out there. There's so many great books out there. And we like giving away those books. So we give away 5 books on every single episode. We give away, I think, 50 or something on Ethicsverse Day 2.0. So hit this QR code and see all the books that are available. Participate in the chat. You might win one. But definitely pick some of those up. And if you have not checked out our award-winning, fastest-growing, top 2% global podcast, okay, The Ethics Experts, this is a great episode for you to check out. We had Fabiana on from Embraer. She had a really cool situation where she was coming into Embraer at the end of a DPA, and she had to really kind of build that compliance program, build that culture of integrity without losing that focus that comes from a DPA, from that external scrutiny. So I'm going to give you a little clip here. It's only a minute long. You're going to love it. If you don't love it, keep it to yourself.
You have to talk about the past and let people know what happened. When I joined Embraer, everything was very confidential. The whole investigation was confidential. But once we settled with the authorities, I decided at the compliance function that we should go around the world to provide training to everybody. So that first year after the settlement, that's 2017, I traveled from Portugal to China, Singapore. I went everywhere just to train people. And I would start every training by talking about the cases. This is what we did. This is a violation of the FCPA, and that's why we shouldn't do anymore. And these are the consequences of what we did. So I think we should talk about the past. We cannot just jump to the part of building culture without letting everybody know the consequences of doing the wrong thing.
So true. It's up to you to build that culture of integrity, and you can tell those stories. And I think the more transparency that we can bring to bear in building this culture and sharing the stories of things that have gone wrong, things that have gone right, shining a light on whistleblowers, the more data points our stakeholders have to really kind of buy in to this culture of integrity, which is required to really drive those better business results that we all know are possible in our heart. Wanted to share with you, I still can't get over the fact that we got awarded best ethics and compliance software in the world from G2. G2 is not one of these pay-to-play sites. This is a site that is full of actual reviews. So if you're looking to upgrade your program, if you feel like the love is lost, if you feel like your old tool, you're sick of getting passed around from acquisitions, or you feel like your tool hasn't been updated in a while, it's worth giving us a shot. We have a brand new risk assessment tool that really is very flexible, that gives you access to, risk intelligence inside your organization so you can make those bets a little bit faster. This is a game of bets. Our life is a game of bets. Our job is a game of bets, and we have to make bets, smart bets with the time that we have. And it's even better when we can get some good data. So we have a special going for Ethicsverse attendees of 50% off of this brand new tool. And I also want to share one more quick package with you. The DOJ defense package has gotten a lot of attention from, we launched this on Ethicsverse Day 2.0, and it's 25% off. So if you're interested in upgrading your tool or you want to get some of these components, give it a shot. We're going to be sharing, I'll share some of these slides, during the presentation. Okay, with that, let's get one more massive emoji explosion to get this thing going for the one and only Dawn and the one and only Michelle. How you guys doing today? How cool do we look?
Good.
Look how cool we look. In space, we have our lightsabers. We have our cool spacesuits. What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about how do we navigate the challenges in a multi-site facility or multiple facilities. How do we push this forward? How do we push our compliance program forward? So we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things: the regulatory coordination, the strategic framework development. How do we get people to adhere to that? And how do we integrate technology across the board so we're not looking for needles in a haystack? We're really just examining those needles, closing those pieces of risk intelligence. So I want to get started with you, Dawn. What are some of the most kind of significant compliance challenges you've encountered when managing programs across multiple facilities? And how do they differ from like a single site operation?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And some of the challenges are the same, whether you're in a large multi-facility site or you're in a single site. I think the reality for healthcare is, right, our teams are never going to be as big as the number of issues and the concerns that we need to address. Just for context, though, so I am the Chief Integrity and Compliance Officer for Trinity Health, and we operate in 26 states and have 93 hospitals, over 400 different legal entities, right, in every service line that you could possibly imagine. With continuing care sites, we have PACE, we have urgent care, we have ambulance, we have all these things, and we even have a health plan. So lots of different compliance areas for us to be focused on. And, of course, one of the biggest challenges is how do we make sure that our compliance program is operating consistently at all of those entities, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are administering our training and education the same. We are administering our conflicts of interest process the same. Our investigations are running the same, no matter where you may call and make a report from. And so that takes a lot of intentional effort to really make sure that we're keeping our team, which is partly centralized, but also partly dispersed, on the same page, using the same tools. And then, again, to be able to benefit from the data that we can gather, right? We have to all be documenting the same way, and we have to all be agreeing to use the same system. So for me, one of the biggest challenges is how do we make sure that we are keeping our programs operating the same across 93 hospitals and with an extended team.
What would you add to that, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with everything Dawn said. We have 71 hospitals spanning 6 states, so similar challenges. And I also agree that these challenges are there regardless of whether you're in 20 states or 2 states. But the one thing that I'll note, or to add to that, I agree with the idea of needing to set your vision for your program, standardize things as much as possible. But the competing pressure always is how do you individually customize to the different cultures that inevitably are going to be in a multi-state system or an integrated health system, even if you're all in the same state. If you're a product of growth and coming together, what you'll face is when you're kind of assessing your system, you're going to have different pockets of compliance programs doing things in their own way, and having the touch with their local stakeholders in their own way. And so how do you standardize but still kind of honor the fact that you want to recognize the different cultures and not take away from a lot of the trust that's been built historically?
Yeah, so let's stay on that for a second. This concept of standardization is important, right? Like at some level, every business is just a sort of collection of processes. The compliance department is a collection of its own processes with its own agendas and so forth. how do you kind of balance that need for standardization versus that, to your point, that need for some kind of individualized or individualization? I'm going to be making words up today, so just bear with me. But, there's some sort of local culture. There's some things that matter there. There's some things that don't. There's some sort of overarching sort of desire for this standardized approach so that you can, reduce the variability in the system. How do you start to kind of tune into that and start to, balance these sometimes competing agendas?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean,
I
one
can
of the
jump.
things. Go ahead, Michelle. You go first this time.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'll say for us, one of the things that we've done, and I've been with Trinity just over 4 years now, but it was really about just our organizational structure. And we have now aligned all of our colleagues under a single senior leader. And that helps with standardization. But the component that was really important to that when we did our organizational redesign was making sure that we just didn't move everybody to a system office, if you will, right? Or some, tower that exists somewhere in some state that nobody really knows a whole lot about. So we were very intentional about ensuring that we continued to have integrity and compliance leaders that were dedicated to our hospitals and systems in each of our regions and states. And those are really the face of our program. That, one of their key responsibilities is making sure that they are establishing relationships and partnerships with the leaders at those hospitals and health systems, but staying in close connection with our system office team and all of us, wanting to be one department, one program. But yeah, you do have to have that connection with those local sites in order to understand not only what the unique risks may be for those sites, but also to appreciate the culture, because as Michelle said, they're going to be different, whether it's based on geography or whether it's based on the leadership style, but really being able to tweak the program so that it is effective for those hospital sites. And for us, that has been through dedicated integrity and compliance leaders at those sites that can really help to sort of be the bridge and the connection point between our standard program and how it actually runs on a day-to-day basis.
So before I come to you, Michelle, I want to understand a little bit more about how did you find these people? Were these people kind of already in place when you got there? And what went into sort of coordinating? Like, I'm curious about kind of the information flow, and because there's some respiration that presumably happens, right? Like there's some directive that's maybe coming from, central office, so to speak. And like, are you using those touch points to really kind of drive that change forward and just getting feedback back? Like, talk me through a little bit kind of how that developed and how that actually works.
So, I'm going to be honest, it wasn't easy to go through the organizational change. And the way that we did it was to ask our leaders who were already at our system office, so our headquarters, if you will, to partner with me. And then I intentionally asked for leaders who were serving in our hospitals and health systems across the country, grabbed a few of those folks, and we all got together and tried to design what this would look like in the new model. And we're about a year and a half maybe into that, and we're still learning and growing. But it was important to get those multiple perspectives. And then, yes, we did, try to leverage as much as we could, sort of our existing team. How do we just sort of, and I say this kind of pejorative, shuffle the deck chairs? How do we move the deck chairs around so that we can get the structure that's most effective for us? But we are really looking at this as an opportunity to break down silos. So I would say when I first joined Trinity, again, huge system, and they're like, oh yeah, there's a good mature compliance program here. But really what we had was 15 different compliance programs that were operating and folks that were more siloed. And so our intention in going through the organizational redesign was to say, hey, there are some things that make sense to do kind of end to end at a system office through a centralized function. But then there are really important components and work that needs to be done at our hospitals and health systems. And so that's why we have that dedicated team. But what we really need to do as a large system is leverage the information that we have, So how do we break down the silos? How do we get people to trust each other? right? Because it never feels good if something bad has happened,
Right.
right? And if it's on, maybe your watch or, right, someone feels as though there's a process that got broken or whatever it was, or maybe we should have caught that 3 years ago. And it's really kind of moving past that and using our structure now in terms of regular meetings and getting our teams together. We have sort of cross-functional groups. So our, folks who maybe support a hospital in California will get together on a monthly basis with other people who work at the Chicago hospital, and maybe some who work in privacy and some who work in audit. And we intentionally get those groups together so they can start to know each other, right, and build that trust. And so then when an issue does come up, we can raise our hands and say, has anyone dealt with this before? How do we handle this? Or if it is something that comes up, right, and we're like, oh, maybe this is happening everywhere else, right? How do we share that information so we can vet it that way? And a lot of that comes, I think, from that just sort of, key sense
Right.
of how do we develop team and how do we support each other?
What would you add to that? How would you, when we're talking to kind of balancing, back to that sort of initial seed question, how would you think about, that question? You want me to answer? I can ask it again, but it was kind of a rambling question here. Okay.
I know exactly what you're asking. And I was in a similar position. Advocate Health is a combination of two systems that happened about 2.5 years ago. And so when we came together, we didn't have 15 different compliance programs, but we had probably 4, because each system was a combination in itself that hadn't fully integrated. And so the challenge was to meet this objective of driving synergies because of this combination and making sure that we are functioning as an enterprise and really showing the value proposition of it all, while still respecting that there's a lot of change management going on here. And what compliance meant to one system was not what compliance meant to another. So setting that vision was extremely important. Putting out those foundational elements, policies and procedures, unifying the hotline, bringing our software platforms together, creating an org structure that brought us all together was extremely important. So we can all kind of get behind the collective vision. But we also try to honor the fact that each of our, respective areas have their own way of doing things. And so putting in that org structure some support specific to the various states within our system. And so that has been helpful. But what we also attempt to do, getting to the customization piece, so standardize, and I fully agree with your comments about data, bringing the data together, making sure we're all documenting in the same way. We have a collective repository so we can track and trend and look at things broadly across the enterprise. But we leverage our compliance committees, certainly, to bring people together across the system to share issues, to look at trends, to share best practices. I think similar in the way you're describing, Dawn. But then also use our leader roundings to get more to the kind of site-based leadership and maintain those relationships, because really the success of any compliance program hinges on those solid relationships. And we also have an ambassador program that connects our team into individuals across the system. We have over 300 ambassadors, and it's growing, where these are kind of individuals who are connected to our program as another duty as assigned, selected by their leader, but really connected in and help us be the eyes and ears on the ground, disseminate education, be at key meetings, raise issues up, and be an additional face of our program. So that's kind of another way we've attempted to extend reach and still kind of have a face at all of our individual facilities in our areas and so forth. But it's important to invest in those individuals. We have annual retreats and regular meetings to kind of make sure that they're aligning with the vision for our program as well.
Man, I mean, I'm kind of trying to put myself in both of your shoes, and there's just so much coordination that must be kind of inherent to what we're talking about. 300 ambassadors over here. You got these, whatever Don called them, those sort of compliance, I guess they're kind of ambassadors as well. But one sort of common thread between both of your answers was this kind of intentionality of making sure that these walls get knocked down. Like silo walls, they don't just like disintegrate over time, right? Like you have to really start swinging, sledgehammers to knock those down. And I think that planning and that intentionality is probably, critical for getting the benefit of this apparatus that you've kind of put in place. I'd also like you to maybe speak to, let's start with you, Michelle, and then I'll go to you, Dawn. I'd like to speak to kind of like what some of the learnings have been, because this is probably not like a set it and forget it thing. It's probably not like you had a piece of paper and you just kind of drew an org chart and you kind of, sent a raven, okay? And then everybody just kind of does it, right? Like there's turnover in the organization, priorities change, priorities within your own department change, things like that. So talk me through some of how you've been able to like manage that complexity and how you've had to iterate through it. Has any of that been surprising? Has any of that been sort of just par for the course?
Well, I make the joke that, like in Queen's Gambit, she's dreaming about chess. When I go to bed, we're often asked what keeps you up at night. It's not a particular issue. It's org charts and keeping up with all the change. And so I have org charts swirling through my head like a chessboard. But I think the biggest learning for me is how important change management is in all of this. And that sounds very simple, but it's really not. And when you're bringing all of these different groups together, and again, everyone has their history, has what they believe to be compliance, and it may feel like your vision, it may not. And how do you manage that change and get everyone bought into kind of this collective way forward? And the change management piece is hard when the rest of the system is also going through its own change. And so, you think you have it, all right, I think our scope and scale is right, this should work, and then something else happens. And, another function that is very important as a partner changes, and how do you keep up with all the other changes throughout the organization and making sure you have the appropriate coverage. So it's a change management piece that was the surprise to me. And it probably shouldn't have been. It seems logical, but you're in the midst of delivering what your vision is and not having the benefit of the time or actually even knowing all of the people when you come together right away to make sure that this is right and that they're going to actually buy in to the change that you're proposing.
Well, that buy-in term is so critical, right? Like at the end of the day, this is all knowledge work. Nobody is like commanded to come to work. People voluntarily get in their car and drive to these locations every day, and they voluntarily decide to sort of follow a policy or follow a procedure or whatever. And it's really tough to kind of navigate that buy-in and actually get authentic buy-in, because a lot of people will pay lips. I mean, we've all seen this 100 times, right? People will be like, yeah, I'll do it. And then they don't do it. And when that buy-in isn't there, the best laid plans often go awry, right? So what hacks do you have, or what have you learned about sort of driving more buy-in across this, multiple, location scenario? Let's start with you, Michelle.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm happy. So, for the teammates that are going through the change, certainly it's really understanding each of what their skill sets is, how they view compliance, how they can best kind of add to the program. And so it really is just taking some time and listening and understanding everyone's strengths to really get to where you're going. From a broader perspective across the enterprise, the buy-in, we have a new integrated compliance program. We want you to care about it. How do we do that? We have spent a lot of time in the initial phases of our integration on our brand and outreach efforts. And so just getting everyone to know us, getting them to kind of view us not as, an opposition party or a police, but really a partner and being at the table. And so a lot of work has been done on our education, outreach, and communication at the start, and making, which really sets the tone internally as well as to who we are and what we stand for.
Yeah, all those little interactions are kind of proof points for the heart that you have or the vision that you have to kind of put that into action. What would you add to that, Dawn, in terms of buy-in or anything else?
Yeah, and I think Michelle said it well, particularly with the team. I think you have to start with the buy-in from them. And it's, about, as she said, setting the vision, getting everyone on board with the vision. And for us here at Trinity, right, we're also, pretty lucky to have long tenured employees, right? So we like to refer to those as our, colleagues who have established deep Trinity roots. But we also really value our new employees, folks who are joining us that have sort of a different perspective and a beginner's eye. So it's a little bit of that natural tension between how do you think about changing something that's maybe been in place for a long time. And it's about driving that sort of openness and receptivity to, hey, just because we've done it that way for so long doesn't mean that's how we have to do it going forward. And the great thing for me in my role is that our CEO sends exactly the same message. So as Michelle mentioned, at Trinity Health, we are also not the only function that's kind of going through this reorganization and looking at how do we operate more effectively as a national system. So our human resources team, our legal team, our, name it, IT team, everyone is sort of going through this process and reestablishing how a national system would work and how we centralize some functions, but how we also still have our important hospital and health system leaders doing their thing. But he is very keen on saying, we have to be open to new perspectives and new ways of doing that. And so that's why, I love when we get new leaders that come in, we get new, colleagues that join our team. And I am all about openness, and saying, hey, anyone can contact me at any time and let's talk about what's working and what's not working. And I know, sometimes that drives maybe the team crazy because they're like, well, Donna's always looking to change things. But I think that's the only way that we can grow and be effective is if we're hearing these new ideas and again, forums like this where you can hear how other people are doing things. And it's really about, for me, sort of fostering that spirit and then getting our leaders on board. And as I said, I've got to push with our CEO who does that too. But, just having everyone know that, we are constantly undergoing change and we're always going to be looking for ways to do things better and more efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that change can be unsettling for people. Human beings, famously hate change, but it's like, guess what? Everything's always changing. You yourself are changing, your environment's changing, the risks that we're facing are changing. And I think the faster or the quicker we can make it clear that we're going to keep changing this because we're going to keep, if you're in a continuous improvement, mindset, inherent to that is change. You know what I'm saying? You're going to continue to try to get better and continue to try to shave off the edges of things and make them more smooth. How do you balance? I want to start with you. Don, and then I'll go to you, Michelle. How do you balance the openness that seems to be necessary to get buy-in, right? Like people in knowledge work, they need to have a voice and you need to run what's called a fair process in order to get that buy-in. How do you sort of balance an openness to new ideas against the sort of sometimes the countervailing sort of tension that comes from, a very clear picture of the vision or a very clear picture of the outcome you're trying to get this program to generate? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll take it in this direction. We'll see if it helps. But the reality is we all want to be open to change. And there are always great ideas about how to do something better, differently. Maybe there's a new tool or a new technology. And again, I don't think this challenge is unique to large health systems, but I do think, maybe it's multiplied a little bit more when you're in a large health system, but sort of turning that rudder to make the ship go in a different direction, that takes time. And so there can be sort of this lag between a really great idea and when we're actually able to implement it, because it just the process to get new technology implemented or the change and leadership that has to happen to make a process change. And so for me, as the senior leader and as a leader in the compliance function, one of the things that I want to make sure I'm doing is keeping the team motivated and engaged. And so, we've got this long list of things that we want to work on, and we're with the leadership team sort of continually looking at how do we prioritize, how do we reprioritize, what are we going to be able to do, sort of more quickly, what's going to take a little bit longer, and really keeping the team focused on, and Michelle said it beautifully, it's setting that vision for this is where our program can go. But it's also being, somewhat of a realist sometimes and saying, oh, yeah, we'd absolutely love to be able to do that. But guess what? We've got 130,000 colleagues. We've got 40,000 physicians, we're not going to be able to implement this really cool sort of monitoring program, tomorrow. It's going to take us a year, maybe a year plus to develop it. But it's keeping those projects moving along and keeping people engaged and informed on what it is we're working on and where we're going.
That's great. That's a great answer. What would you add to that, Michelle? Or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Dawn and kind of what is important in getting that buy-in and moving people forward, creating that safe space where people can speak up and say, I don't really like this. This isn't what I think we should be doing. The challenge there is, sometimes it just may end up being that they're not aligning with the vision. So being able to differentiate between an open space and valuing feedback, and then recognizing when someone is kind of change stuck and they're just maybe not going to buy in the end because this isn't what they signed up for. Aside from all of the growth, just the role of compliance is changing in our world.
Right.
And we talked about data, but a lot of people who have had a long career in compliance may not be as savvy with data analytics or technology or the things we now need to rely on in order to scale these large enterprise compliance programs. And so that's hard. And so really focusing, I mentioned before, on core competencies and providing people with the tools they need, if they are bought in, to get to where they need to in order to scale the program in the way it's designed to scale is extremely important. I mean, as an example, we have an amazing diversion team within our program. When we came together 2+ years ago, they were running this diversion program for 5 hospitals. Without additional resources, we're now asking them to run it for 71 hospitals. And wow. So, that's going to take a lot of reprioritization of work and streamlining processes and relying on others like ambassadors or diversion response teams or, other individuals within operations to connect into the program. So it takes a lot of adjustment, and what you designed and had pride in for those 5 hospitals is going to feel different when you're asked to expand it. And so making sure you're recognizing the whole reason we're expanding is because this is a beautiful program, but it's not realistic to do it in the same way with all of those individual touches or whatever changes need to be made to scale, and making sure people understand what's needed to extend it to the extent we need things extended now. And that's true for, the majority of our programs that have come together.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, right? At least when, to use your example of it's at 5 hospitals and then it's going to 40 and then it's going to more, to know well, what actually matters? What about the dining experience at your restaurant that when it's just one location needs to be preserved, and what's okay to let go? Right. Do you take that kind of materiality lens? Do you have a picture of that kind of on the front end, or do you just kind of figure that out as you go? That sort of, that 80-20 rule seems to be in everything. Probably 20% of the things that are, you have this picture of this sort of one, single location thing. Again, back to your example that you need to multiply out. You're not going to be able to multiply out 100% of that, but there's probably 20% of it that's really super core that's going to be that must be sort of retained. How do you go through, I want to start with you, Michelle. How do you go through that process of assessing what must be retained and what's okay to get some variability on?
Yeah, I think what's key to that is when I talk about setting the vision and these foundational items is to make sure that you're all aligned on your way of assessing risk, what your thresholds are, what you consider low, medium, high, because that then informs what you need to keep doing and what you can stop doing. And so diversion, our privacy team, is another great example, amazing team. But how do you know what's a low risk privacy investigation that you can maybe institute different streamlined processes around versus keeping your attention on those medium to high risk issues? And so that's kind of a out of the gate issue that you need to deal with it within a kind of newly integrated program. Is we all have to view risk in the same way. When we talk about risk, we need to speak the same language so that we can institute the right level of materiality within each of our different processes.
That's great. Dawn, what would you add to that? Or what's your perspective on that sort of, assessing what matters and what doesn't?
Yeah, so 2 other components that maybe I would add to that. And one, again, was really looking at our functions and the work we do. And again, we took this opportunity when we were going through the restructure and remembering, right, that compliance is everyone's responsibility. So, for example, there was some monitoring that we were doing of physician payments, and we said, you know what, maybe it makes more sense for our finance team to do this. And so we actually took that bucket of work And we said, look, finance, we know that you appreciate the value that this is bringing and the risk mitigation that it brings to the organization. But we have other things that we need to focus on. So if you want this oversight and monitoring work to continue, can you dedicate resources to it? And they did, right? So again, it's leveraging sort of our business partners, our administrative, our clinical partners to say, hey, it's not just only compliance that should be doing monitoring, right? Everyone should be involved. And here's the tools to help you do that. And here's how we can stay connected on what you're doing. And the second piece that I think Michelle touched on a little bit, right? And we have to get better at this, I think, as a profession. And certainly I know within myself and my own team, but leveraging our own data, and not just data, in a way of, how do we pinpoint the highest risk, although that is important, but also to the point about how can we leverage technology maybe to take over some of that monitoring, right? Is there a robot that can be programmed to be able to read this report and just spit out to us what it is that we need to be focused on and looking at? And so I'm, really grateful. We do have a couple experts on our team that are helping us to develop a data strategy and how do we implement this. But we truly have to be thinking out of the box about different ways that we can leverage technology to help us make sure that we're focusing in on the biggest priorities for our organization.
We're like halfway through this thing, and I told everybody at the start that this was going to be a real treat. You guys are both so smart. I want to kind of deconstruct a couple of things that I've just kind of noticed in the last couple of answers here. I think there's a focus. Remember that Simon Sinek thing about the golden circle, right? In the core is the why, then around that is the what, and then the outer circle is the how. Whoa. My studio's falling apart over here. So you really retained, the what needs to be done, in your last example, Dawn, we need to do this kind of oversight, but you were very, and then that core of the why is still there because it matters to the organization. We care about risk, but the how, you're very open to how that can be done in a different way to, again, rebalance the resources we have, take advantage of other resources that might have capacity. So that's one. Another thing you said that really resonated with me was you went to the finance team and you really sold that, what sounds like in a really smart way. You said, I know you see value in this, and I know you know why this matters because of the risk that this is going to mitigate. So you're really speaking their language. And you didn't call them bean counters, which was great. So you were able to pass that over to somebody that maybe had some capacity or had some penchant for this kind of work, and you were still able to achieve the same what, tied down, anchored down to that same why. So I really love that. And again, I think both of you have shown kind of a high degree of strategic thinking. Okay, and what I mean by that is keeping our eyes on the outcome that we're trying to generate, keeping our eyes on that vision, and being open to taking different paths up the mountain. On any mountain, there's like infinite paths up the mountain, right? Like there's thousands of paths up the mountain, and no one path is like necessarily the right path because those circumstances change. Maybe the weather pattern changes or whatever. And I think that constant forward pressure, that like beginner's mindset that you said, those beginner's eyes really allow for a lot more agility in sort of reconfiguring the resources that we have available to us to achieve those ends. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can connect to, the business objectives, the higher the likelihood is that we're going to get the buy-in that's necessary to drive this culture of integrity, this culture of compliance forward. So I want to start this question. I have another question here from Jana. Jana, thanks for sharing this. I want to start with you, Michelle, and then I'll go to you, Dawn. How do you keep your ambassadors engaged? We talked a lot about the importance of having sort of engagement at these different sites. We talked a lot about, for this circulatory system to work, there has to be that sort of respiration, right? But that's going to take sort of engagement at these touch points at these other locations that you're not maybe at every single day. And so whether those are regional compliance officers or whether these are sort of voluntary people that maybe are doing this as like a side pot to their main job, that engagement is critical. So how do you keep them engaged, Michelle?
Well, I mentioned before we do ongoing training and then try to do an annual retreat. So try to, have them be incentivized by being part of this larger program and making it fun. That's important too. But we have individuals within our program who are assigned to the different kind of groups of ambassadors within the organization, and they're responsible for engaging and having regular meetings and providing education, getting information in from them, and really helping them understand their role. And it could vary depending on the area. Maybe someone has been historically very engaged in privacy, and so they're kind of more aligned with our privacy team, but really just giving them constant kind of care and feeding to continue to buy in to our program and feeling like they're really part of it. That's the key. Is we don't want them to feel like we're just leaning on them. We want to really have them feel like they're an extension of what we do.
And so, like, are you having touch points with them? Are you kind of trying to take their temperature? Are you trying to kind of assess the level of engagement? Because like that waxes and wanes over time, right? Like if there's other pressures for the other points of their job, or maybe they've just been doing it too long, you know, it's like your first day on a job is very different than your 10,000th day on the job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So regular touch points with both them and their leader, because the other tension point is if they get too invested in compliance, their leader will start saying, hey, then go work for compliance. You know, I need you to do your day-to-day job. And so making sure that the leader really understands the value of this and isn't, taking away from it in any way and supporting them in their role. So yes, regular touch points, But to your point that this waxes and wanes, we actually are working through our 3-year strategic vision right now. And then the ambassador program is one specific area that we're tending to because of our integration and bringing all these different types of ambassador programs together. Each one felt a little different. And so really putting time to making sure we're standardizing those touch points and making it very clear to everyone how important they are, what their role is as it relates to our program and so forth, and hoping to launch all of that at our retreat that I mentioned. So it's a never-ending process to make sure that you're kind of keeping it a healthy part of what you do.
Well, that's kind of the fun of the game. It's like an ever-evolving puzzle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What would you add to that, Dawn, from an engagement perspective?
Yeah. So, right, we're always trying to make sure that we harness the passion, right? Most people who are doing compliance work really have a passion for that, for risk mitigation. And, what I found over my career is that information can be really helpful there. So I try to be as transparent as I can. I am, sort of constantly taking the messages from our senior leadership team and making sure that my team, the regional team, is as informed as we can be. Now, again, in a large organization, sometimes that's a challenge even because we don't always know what's happening everywhere. But I think that goes a long way. And so does recognition. And organizationally, we have a big focus on that right now. How do we recognize the good work that's been done? How do we share that with the team in a way that feels good to people? And then how do we make sure that we're removing roadblocks? So we know our jobs are not easy. There's going to be challenges that we come up against. And so how can I help the team stay engaged by making the work that they need to do easier? So I'm always asking the leadership team to be focusing on that. And, lastly, and I think you all have talked about this before on your, webcast here, but how do we make sure that we're having people take care of themselves? This is a tough job. Right. Yeah. We're inundated with issues every day. We hardly ever get to hear about the good things. And so how do we make sure that we're encouraging our team and promoting wellness and self-care? Because at the end of the day, right, we're not good to anybody if we're not taking care of ourselves and our team.
So I'm really glad you brought that up because human beings are not machines, right? Like we go through these different cycles all the time. It's easy to get burnt out. The industry that we're in is a very stressful industry, right? Like there's so many different competing stressors and incentives and challenges and all that kind of thing. How would I say this? Like, how do you make that real? How does that self-care thing you just talked about not just turn into a platitude that's just kind of a bumper sticker, but instead is something that's actually sort of part of the recipe? You know what I mean? Like part of the prioritization list. Is it just talking about it frequently? Is it just like reminding folks that like they need to do it, or is it something more than that?
It is a lot of it, right? Just awareness, keeping it forefront, making sure that my voice is right, contributing and saying, hey, look, as the top leader for this team, right, know that I support you working when it makes sense for you to work, and if your hours are different than somebody else's, that's okay. Setting realistic expectations for response times and when we're going to be able to get to things. But another program or aspect of this that, again, I've tried to be very intentional about is how do we cross-train? I specifically said that for, my direct reports, where they're responsible for big geographical regions and, right, they have people reporting to them that are dealing with all these hospitals and other facilities. But how do we leverage each other, right? Because you should be able to go out for a week and not have to check email, right? Someone else should be able to step in. And so we have really been voicing support for that. And part of that comes, right, with breaking down the silos and sharing that information. So, our leader who's on the East Coast can have at least some awareness of what's happening on the West Coast. So if our West Coast leader needs to be out for a week, right, the East Coast leader can step in and be that leader for a week. And I think that is something that we need to keep working on, and we need to make sure it filters all the way through the team. But right, our colleagues, our team should not feel like they have to check in or they have to be on a phone call, or they're not going to be there to hear about an issue. We should find a way to make sure that good cross coverage so people can really disconnect and recharge.
So I want to pivot a little bit. That's a great answer. I love that idea of not checking email on vacation. I might need to come work for you there, Dawn. But I want to pivot a little bit.
I'm sure Dawn does that.
Well, you have to say it before you do it. You know what I mean? I want to talk a little bit about some common pitfalls in scaling compliance programs across diverse healthcare environments, across multiple facilities, across multiple businesses. I mean, you guys made the point earlier that a lot of what we're talking about translates to a lot of different industries, but at some level, the acuity of it is maybe a little bit higher because we have multiple businesses in many times within a specific health system. So I want to start with you, Michelle. What are some of the pitfalls you've seen, or what are some of the things to avoid in trying to, build what we're talking about today?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, what came to mind as John was talking about burnout actually is relates to this question as well. I think one of the things we're learning in designing an enterprise org structure for compliance is we really try to put people in specific areas. So, you've got our rehab compliance folks in one area and your home health in another, like very, because the idea was we want to get subject matter experts for the enterprise. And by all means, that's what we have now. But the pitfall of that, or potential pitfall, is that you become so narrowly focused that the reason you got into compliance was to get a more of a variety of issues or more connection with people tends to narrow then. And so what we're hearing as we're kind of testing this org structure after 2 years is our privacy team is a great example where we have a team of like expert investigators, but they're only like investigating all the bad things that are happening all the time. And they're not getting to do the education and outreach, and they're not getting this kind of holistic view of compliance in that role. And that can really wear on you. And so should we be taking a step back and giving people at least the opportunity for that cross coverage and cross function and getting them more involved in more of the fun things in compliance as well. And so that was something that, we had best intentions. We're going to get our super experts in each area. But these experts are like, oh my gosh, I can't take it anymore. I need to do something else. Put me in front of let me train a group. Let me interact with people in a kind of a fun, proactive way rather than dealing with all the problems or whatever the example may be. So that's something we're reviewing right now. And that was a learning from all of this.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, at some level, we're kind of talking about the complexity of a chessboard, back to your analogy from before. But we have to remember that the people that are on the board, they're not really chess pieces. They do a bunch of different things, and they have their own desires, and it's easy for them to get burnt out or get bored. And I think as all those things happen, it's really a question of like foot on the gas. It's a question of engagement. And like in the apparatus or in the vision we have, we assume a certain level of engagement that like we can rely on for this thing to work. But like those feet on the gas are changing, constantly. And I think to your point, tuning into it, realizing that like, things can move around, but that kind of driving that engagement forward is really the key at the end of the day for this whole sort of, risk management apparatus to work. I think opens us to a little bit more agility, like I said, or a little bit more flexibility to put people in other spots. I want to move to you, Dawn. What are some of the pitfalls you've tried to avoid, or the things that you've seen, or some of the learnings you've had in really, building this type of, multi-site program?
So two things that I would mention, and one is it's really foundational. Again, as Michelle said, whether you're operating in 2 states or 22 states, right? Our states have different state laws. We operate under different state attorney generals. We have, right, for us here in healthcare, right, MAC or other governmental, agencies and contractors that have different regional interpretation on things. And so the question for the program really becomes, how do we factor in the state laws? And we have a decision point. Do we either customize our program where we need to, or our risk mitigation, because we're going to accommodate these different state laws and maybe different state enforcement agencies? Or are we going to go to the most stringent and most conservative interpretation, and everyone's going to operate on that basis, even though that may not be what's required for their state? So that's another factor that I think, right, comes into play when you're operating in a large, multi-state system. And then the second point that I would mention is really important, and we talk about this as compliance professionals all the time, right? To be at the forefront of strategic change and operational change and technology change, because when you're in a large system and you're operating things and implementing things on a standard approach, if you get it wrong, you get it wrong everywhere. And so the fix is all that much greater if you don't have, right, that compliance team who's maybe engaged and on board when all the planning is being done, and having the opportunity to ask questions to make sure that we can provide that proactive advice.
Man, that's such a good point. You have to be thoughtful, right? You have to be thoughtful. You have to kind of think through things, but inevitably you're going to miss something at some point. You're going to roll something out that needs to change. And if you don't have that engagement, then it's so much harder. It's 10 times, 100 times harder to fix that system or fix that new policy. I want to talk a little bit about, do you think that there are certain foundational elements that must be in place? I want to start with you, Dawn, and then I'll move over to you, Michelle. Do you think there are some certain foundational elements that must be in place before attempting to sort of streamline compliance across multiple facilities? Or is that question just showing my naivete because nobody gets the benefit of that? You're really kind of trying to herd a bunch of cats that are already, in the yard that already exist?
Yeah, I think there's an awareness, at least in my organization, for the benefit of streamlining. And there's an openness across the board to doing things differently, so long as, right, we can present that sort of compelling case for here's why we are going to do it. But I think, it's natural for healthcare, and particularly in this moment, right, where we're anticipating that there could be, right, significant financial impact to us with the policy and the other political changes that are happening. I think, and even post-COVID, right, we're sort of forced to think about how we can do our work differently, how we can bring more value add, how can we streamline things, and not just for our team and the work that we do, but for the leaders that we interact with. Right. I mean, if it takes a physician 7 minutes to fill out my conflict of interest form, but I can cut that down to 3 minutes or 4 minutes by using some technology or some tool to help us, right? That's just a lot of minutes. So 4 minutes times, 40,000 physicians, that's a lot of minutes of value add to our organization. And so we are really, as I said, sort of, engaging the team to say, hey, no idea is crazy. Let's throw them all on the table. Now, again, we have to go through that prioritization effort, and we have to make sure that we can get the funding if it is, or that we've got a plan to implement the change. But I'm all about doing that. We really can't stay the same. We have to keep evolving. The world around us, as you said, is evolving. And so our program has to as well.
Before I go to you, Michelle, anybody who thinks compliance is boring is an idiot. Okay, I'm just kidding, kind of. But think of this complexity. Think of the strategic thinking that you have to engage in every single day to continue to push your program forward. And I think compliance oftentimes in our organizations, particularly larger organizations where you don't have that control, so to speak, or the opportunity to establish your own brand with like a smaller stakeholder group, it often gets like a bad rap. And I think if anybody in either of your organizations spend 15 minutes on this call, they would very quickly see, oh my gosh, the scope of this department is so much bigger than I thought. The complexity of it is so much bigger. And yet in the face of it, there's a certain grace and there's a certain openness that you guys have talked about throughout, where this is not a bumper sticker on the car. You're really trying to be a part of the business and really trying to add that value. So that I was just really kind of struck by that, or struck with that, over the last 50 or so minutes. Let's go to you, Michelle, on that question, if you can remember it. And if you can't, I'll say it again, because I don't remember it off the top of my head.
I kind of remember it, but I do have a thought. So hopefully it's responsive. But to your point, I mean, I think when you're talking about compliance, you can perhaps have variations in your program depending on geography. The laws may differ and so forth. And so having one program, all the foundational elements aligned, I believe is important, but I think there are worlds where it's not necessary. But I think the foundational piece that is absolutely necessary and goes to keeping up with all the changes and making sure you understand the strategic vision, the innovation, is having a seat at the table. So I often joke that compliance is as much of a campaign as it or a sales. You're in sales,
Yeah.
You're campaigning all the time because you're trying to convince everyone of the value proposition that your program brings, making sure that you're at the table so that the organization can get to where they want to get in the right way without the unexpected obstacles and so forth. And so that's kind of, for me, the foundation that needs to be laid when you bring a bunch of different programs together, is making sure that you're establishing kind of your value within the organization enough so that you're at the table and you can detect these emerging risks, put mitigation efforts in place, and continue to build on that value proposition.
So I love that point. You said 5 things there that I absolutely loved. Like, it is 100% a game of influence. We're human beings trying to influence the behavior of other human beings. And that can be down to the frontline level where they need to follow our policies. It can be at the middle manager level where their endorsement and their engagement is critical because they have a disproportionate level of potential impact on the people that report to them, and on up to that top tier of leadership whose endorsement we need, or whose endorsement, when we get it, makes our job so much easier. So it's absolutely a sales role. It's absolutely a game of influence. And I think just recognizing that is going to allow our goal seek mechanism that is our brain, this tool that we're all born with, to find new opportunities to reframe what we're doing, to communicate it in different ways, to resonate more. Because again, nobody can do compliance by themselves. And I would say to anybody who's in the audience who feels like, man, these guys have it all. Man, I wish I had the endorsement. I wish I had the resources to build this kind of a program. I think I found this episode to be extremely inspiring to see what's possible. And I think the battle always starts in our mind. If we think we're right or we think we're wrong, we're always correct. If we think the person we're talking to is going to view us as a cost center, well, guess what? We're going to come across in a way that increases the odds that they're going to view us as a cost center. And I think if we can instead understand and believe at our core that we have so much value to add to the organization, we're going to show up in different ways, and we're going to have a little bit more tenacity when we're trying to get that point across, or try to pick the lock, so to speak, to drive that influence forward. But I just every week it's like a shot in the arm for me to remind me of the potential that our departments have in our organization to drive change and actually build these cultures of integrity that do animate the business, that do lower turnover, that do drive higher employee engagement, and ultimately more sort of enterprise value at the end of the day, which is how all investors and all people at the board level keep score. So I love what you said. It's just right there for us. It's just sometimes a little mindset shift to get something unstuck. And sometimes from the outside, you see a program and you're like, oh my gosh, that thing is, man, it's perfect, it's pristine. But I'm sure, when you step kind of behind the curtain, it's a ton of iteration, and it's a ton of learning, and it's a ton of trying something that doesn't work and picking yourself up and trying something again. So I appreciate so much the candor you guys had and the transparency you've had. I want to do one quick rapid fire question. I'm going to start with you, Dawn. Are there some, a lot of this only works when we have some monitoring in place where we can identify something before it becomes a problem. Are there any kind of like baseline kind of metrics that you look at or data points that you monitor on an ongoing basis to identify some kind of a compliance issue before it becomes a problem that's going to need like extensive remediation across this complex system that you're a part of managing?
Yeah, and I don't think we have the secret sauce for that either, right? I mean, we are always trying to pinpoint, well, what's the government focused on? What are our big risks coming out of the risk assessment? I think what we're doing now, though, is really working to fine tune our data. So whereas in the past we might have said, oh, that's a risk, we should pull some samples and we should look at that. Now what we're trying to do is to leverage machine learning or AI to say, how can we really look at our own data? And when we pull the samples, pull the ones that are really the highest risk where we may actually find that risk to materialize, right? And so we're just on the cusp of starting that, and it's going to take us, time to evolve there. But I think that's how we change and keep our program focused on the most highest priorities.
Amazing. How about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I agree. I think looking at data in different ways is key for the evolution of a program. There are platform software out there that we use to help identify where there may be high risk areas that we need to look at. We have a dashboard where we've selected metrics that we're monitoring. For example, the number of privacy investigations that result in reportable breaches, and is that kind of the right ratio, and or is our hotline reporting at a healthy rate, but yet what is reporting is at a low substantiation rate. So looking at different metrics and making sure that we keep evolving those metrics so that they're actually driving compliance within the organization and not just tracking like we did 10 audits this week. And so there's a lot of discussion on this topic, but I think in the industry, this is the direction forward.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like there's no silver bullet metric. You know what I'm saying? It's not like a scale you can step on. We're kind of judging health, and like maybe it's weight, maybe it's your VO2 max, maybe it's your body fat. Like it's a confluence, it's a bouquet of metrics. But I think what you both said is that you're constantly looking at these things, looking for hints on where might need to investigate a little bit further. So phenomenal, man. See. I promised we never waste your time on the Ethicsverse. This was an awesome, awesome episode. Look at the comments. The comments are absolutely blowing up. Let's get one more emoji explosion. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Michelle. I hope you guys can join us on Thursday. We got Forrest Deegan coming. We're going to be talking about third-party risk. And then next week, we got a great episode, moving beyond paper programs, going from theory to practice with the one and only Elizabeth Wilkes-Wood, who I love. So hope to see you guys Thursday. Hope to see you next Thursday. And if you love the Ethicsverse, share it with your team, share it with your friends. We're at the stage now. We got to learn. We have to sharpen our sword every single week. If you're not learning, you're dying. You got to keep getting better. So we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.